Welcome to Charlie's Bedtime Stories. Place your hand against an ancient Egyptian doorway at dusk. Outside, the street still radiates the desert heat. Inside, thick mudbrick has delayed the day's warmth, while height, shade, and moving northern air make the house noticeably more comfortable. We'll move room by room through a prosperous New Kingdom home, from its sunlit outer wall to its rooftop sleeping terrace. This house is a historically grounded composite, shaped by remains from Thebes, Amarna, and Deir el-Medina. It does not record one particular evening. Along the way, we'll see how massive walls bought time, how a tall central hall guided warm air upward, and how the roof welcomed both the breeze and the relief of night. We begin in the heated street, just before crossing the threshold. Late sunlight lies across the mudbrick facade. The wall faces the street with little ceremony. It is broad, solid, and still warm after hours beneath the sun. From a distance, its plain surface may not suggest clever engineering. It does not turn, spin, drip, or make any pleasant mechanical hum. Its work is done by remaining exactly where it is. Move closer, and the doorway reveals the wall's depth. This is not a thin opening cut through a light partition. It is a short passage through a substantial mass of sun-dried brick. The outer edge still catches the evening light. The recess has already fallen into shade. That depth adds to the transition. Direct sunlight reaches the outer face, but the inner passage is protected by the wall around it. Light, glare, and radiant heat all fade as you move through the thickness, rather than simply stepping across a narrow line. This thickness provides the first answer to the house's relative comfort. Mudbrick has thermal mass. As the sun heats the exterior, warmth does not immediately pass through the whole wall and arrive indoors. Instead, the material absorbs heat. Its journey toward the inner surface takes time. At dusk, the outer and inner faces of the wall can seem to belong to different moments of the day. The street-facing side has spent hours beneath the sun. The shaded side has not yet received all that stored energy. Between them lies the slow passage of warmth through brick. The wall changes the schedule of the heat. It does not destroy warmth, and it cannot keep the interior cold forever. During a long and severe hot period, the rooms will eventually grow warm. But for much of the day, thick walls can leave the interior noticeably more comfortable than the exposed street. That difference matters to the body. A person crossing the threshold needs no measuring instrument to recognize shade, reduced glare, and an inner surface that has not yet released the full heat of the afternoon. The change is immediate enough to feel, even though the process behind it has unfolded slowly. This house belongs to the prosperous end of New Kingdom domestic life. It has several rooms, a central hall, storage spaces, a rear work area, and access to the roof. It should not stand for every dwelling beside the Nile. A small rural structure and an urban townhouse did not share identical plans or resources, yet their basic building material was remarkably practical. Sun-dried mudbrick could serve as both enclosure and buffer. The bricks did not need to remain untouched forever. Mud plaster could protect their surfaces, and regular maintenance helped keep an earthen building sound. What matters for our walk is the mass itself. Many layers of material stand between the sun and the inhabited room. In a sense, the wall promises delay rather than coolness. It gives the household useful hours. Work, conversation, meals and rest can take place behind a barrier that still holds much of the day on its outer side. Stand for a moment in the doorway. Behind you, the street remains bright and exposed. Ahead, the entrance passage narrows the light. The air is not cold, but the conditions have changed. The house has made the heat wait. Later tonight, warmth stored in the bricks will begin to reach the inner surfaces. Then other parts of the building will become more important. Openings, height, moving air, and the roof will each take their turn. This is a house that works through sequence rather than miracle. For now, its first secret is simply timing. The thick wall shifts the hottest interior period instead of pretending that heat can vanish. If you enjoy calm, everyday history, you can subscribe for more stories like this. Cross fully into the entrance passage, and another part of the household's answer appears. It is much smaller than the wall. It is also much easier to move. Beside the doorway stands an unglazed earthenware water jar. Its surface is porous rather than sealed beneath a smooth coating. A small amount of water from inside can reach the outer surface, where it meets the passing air and evaporates. Evaporation carries heat away. The effect is modest and local, but close to the vessel, the water and moving air can make the immediate surroundings more pleasant. A doorway or corridor is a useful place for the jar because air is already traveling there. The vessel does not need to cool an entire house to be worthwhile. Someone passing through may pause beside it, drink from the household supply, or simply benefit from the small region of altered air around it. Monumental architecture is not required. An ordinary domestic object can make a small adjustment exactly where people often pass. The jar depends upon placement. In stagnant air, it has less opportunity to affect its surroundings. Where a draft reaches it, the porous surface and the airflow work together. There is no hidden machine inside the pottery. The household has not acquired a clay refrigerator. This is a simple exchange involving water, dry air, and heat. Its scale suits the threshold. A little cooler here, a little more comfortable close by. The massive wall has delayed the day's warmth. The movable jar changes one small area within that protected interior. One solution belongs to the bulk of the building. The other can be filled, emptied, shifted, and placed where it helps most. Its ordinary appearance is part of the point. The household's response to heat is not limited to features fixed by a builder. It also includes an object that someone must tend, refill, and keep in a useful place. Architecture and daily routine meet beside the doorway. A slight current passes around the vessel and continues into the house. Follow it away from the threshold. The corridor opens, the ceiling seems to lift, and the next room rises much higher than expected. At first, the central hall is simply darker than the entrance. Your eyes adjust to surfaces beyond the direct reach of the sun. The floor spreads out, and doorways lead toward lower rooms around it. Then the strongest impression comes from overhead. The ceiling is high. In excavated New Kingdom houses, including substantial residences at Amarna and domestic settings at Deir el-Medina, central halls could rise above the rooms around them. Surviving foundations and plans show that this difference was deliberate. This was not simply an enclosed courtyard that happened to receive a roof, it was an important volume within the home. The hall could serve for reception and daily living. The exact arrangement on any particular evening has not survived, so there is no need to fill it with an invented family following a perfectly timed routine. The architecture itself gives us enough human evidence. People entered this space. They remained here, passed into other rooms, and lived beneath a ceiling set unusually far above their heads. That apparently unused height performed useful work. Warm air tends to rise. In a low room, accumulated heat remains close to the level where people sit, stand, eat, and try to rest. In a taller hall, some of that warmer air can gather above the occupied zone. The upper space is not truly empty. It gives heat somewhere else to be. This does not mean the lower part of the room remains evenly cool in every condition. Airflow changes with the weather, the available openings, and the warmth of surrounding surfaces. Still, the basic relationship is clear. A higher ceiling places more distance between the household and some of the warmest air in the room. Raise your attention slowly from the floor. At the lower level are the paths people use. They move from the entrance to the hall, from the hall to an inner chamber, and from a side room toward the rear work area. Above those movements lies a second, less visible circulation. Warm air drifts upward. In a low passage, the ceiling remains close, and the air has little vertical room. Here, the occupied area is only the lower part of a much larger interior. The household uses the floor, while the architecture reserves the space overhead for light and air. The room's proportions also shape social experience. A reception hall feels different from a narrow corridor or a small inner chamber. It offers more shared space and more exposure to household movement. Someone remaining here occupies both an architectural center and a thermal one. The surrounding rooms are lower and more enclosed. They may benefit from shade and protection, but they do not possess the same tall reservoir overhead. The hall helps organize both people and air. It is tempting to treat height as display alone, especially in a prosperous house. Greater volume certainly requires more construction than a low ceiling. But in this climate, space above eye level need not be ornamental excess. It can be practical precisely because no one occupies it. The household lives below, the warmer air rises above. A room that appears grander also creates distance between bodies and heat. Now keep your gaze near the roofline. The high ceiling has allowed warm air to climb, but height is only half the arrangement. Once the air has risen, it still needs somewhere to go. Small openings wait near the top of the hall. Where the interior is darkest, a set of small grated openings breaks the upper wall. They are easy to overlook. At human height, a doorway demands more attention, as does the water jar at the entrance. These openings cannot be reached without climbing, and they offer no broad view. Their importance comes from their position. As the air in the hall warms, it rises into the upper part of the room. The small clerestory openings give some of that accumulated warmth a route outside. Instead of remaining trapped beneath a sealed ceiling, warmer air can pass through the grates near the top of the structure. The high room and the upper exits work as a pair. A tall hall without openings can move warmth away from the floor for a time, but the heat remains enclosed. An opening placed low may admit or release air, but it does little to drain the warmest layer gathered above. height becomes more useful when the exit waits where warm air naturally travels. Imagine the occupied level below. People do not need to adjust a complicated device or describe the process in technical language. The arrangement works quietly while the household uses the room. Air warmed by bodies, surfaces, and the fading day moves upward. The top of the hall offers less resistance than a fully closed roof. The grates also preserve a degree of separation. A broad open hole would admit more light, dust, and exposure. A smaller screened opening can allow exchange while the hall remains enclosed. We do not need to claim perfect ventilation to recognize the logic. On a still evening, the movement may be limited. During an especially hot period, the house will not empty itself of all unwanted warmth. Passive architecture depends upon conditions outside as well as design inside. The openings cannot command the atmosphere. They may also behave differently as the outdoor temperature and wind direction change. An opening creates an opportunity for exchange. It does not promise that air will always pass through in the same amount or direction. The house responds to the evening. It is not independent of it. But perfection is not the standard by which ordinary comfort is judged. A household benefits whenever rising warmth can leave instead of remaining at head height. Small improvements repeated across hours can change how a room feels. There is something pleasingly economical about the feature. The most useful opening is not always the largest or most obvious. Here, a narrow break in the upper wall completes the purpose of an entire tall chamber. Trace the route once more. Heat builds low in the house, then rises through the hall. Near the roof, the grates provide an exit. Nothing rotates. No servant needs to stand nearby, waving an enormous fan until everyone becomes embarrassed. The building simply uses the natural tendency of warmer air to rise. Yet releasing warm air is only one side of circulation. If air leaves the upper hall, fresher air must be able to enter somewhere else. To find one possible entrance, we need to climb above the ceiling line and step onto the roof. The house is still warm beneath us. The sky has begun to darken. From the north, an evening current approaches the town, and the roof has been shaped to meet it. The roof opens the house to a wider landscape. Beyond the parapet lie other mudbrick walls, terraces, and the fading edge of the settlement. Above them is the direction that matters to this part of the design. North, toward the prevailing breeze. On prosperous multi-room residences, a roof feature could be angled toward that moving air. Often described as a windcatcher or roof scoop, it presents an opening to the breeze and guides the captured current downward. Several kinds of New Kingdom evidence support this feature. Depictions, architectural models, and excavated remains work together to make the design understandable. The complete upper structure does not always survive, but enough evidence remains to show that builders could turn a roof toward the wind. They did not have to wait for air to wander inside by chance. Each type of evidence contributes something different. Foundations and house plans show the larger rooms and possible routes below. Models and depictions preserve forms that mudbrick upper structures have not always carried intact into the present. Read together, they allow a careful reconstruction of how an elevated opening could face the breeze and serve the interior. Stand beside the opening and face north. A flat wall would force the breeze around it. an angled scoop receives part of the current and sends it into a passage leading below. The roof becomes more than an exposed surface. Its shape selects air and gives that air a root. This does not mean every ancient Egyptian home possessed a windcatcher. A one-room rural dwelling cannot be casually given the architecture of an urban estate simply because the idea is attractive. Windcatchers belong especially to substantial houses with enough rooms, height, and resources to use them. Our composite household is prosperous enough to have that arrangement. Its roof connects to the inner rooms. Its central hall rises above neighboring spaces. Its builders could shape more than a simple shelter. Even here, the windcatcher does not guarantee a strong flow every hour. The breeze changes, openings may be managed differently, and the heat inside the house affects the movement. Passive systems offer opportunities rather than commands. Still, the intention is clear. A north-facing roof scoop turns a common feature of the Nile environment into a domestic resource. The household cannot produce the wind, but the house can be ready when it arrives. That distinction matters. An open rooftop may receive a pleasant breeze, but the people below gain little if the current remains above them. The angled opening translates rooftop air into interior movement. It also shows why orientation matters. The house is not merely a pile of cool-looking mudbrick. Its useful features face directions, connect levels, and respond to the hour. The builder must consider where heat enters, where air approaches, and where people need relief. A current touches the raised edge of the scoop. Part of it passes overhead, part enters. At once, the broad northern breeze narrows into an interior path. Follow that captured air down through the roof opening. The terrace recedes above, the passage darkens, and the moving current returns us to the rooms beneath. Inside the windcatcher, the air no longer moves across an open roof. It descends through a confined passage toward the shaded parts of the house. A breeze that might otherwise pass over the building has been given a reason to enter it. The current emerges into an interior space and spreads. It may brush a wall, pass through a doorway, or reach the central hall. Its exact strength varies, but the architecture has established a route. Now the features we have visited begin to form one arrangement. The roof scoop provides an inlet for northern air. The tall hall gives warmer air room to rise. Small openings near the top allow some of that warmth to escape. The house is not sealed against the climate. It manages exchanges with it. This is less dramatic than a single powerful gust. In fact, a brief gust may be less useful if it enters and has nowhere to continue. Sustained comfort comes from a path. Air is invited in at one point, carried through connected spaces, and released at another. Doorways help shape that route. A corridor can narrow it, while a larger hall gives it room to spread. Upper openings draw warmer air away from the occupied level, while lower passages bring moving air closer to the body. The house has no rigid ductwork in the modern sense. It would be misleading to describe it as a machine with predictable output. Mudbrick rooms are not sealed compartments, and the air does not follow a diagram with perfect discipline. It leaks, pauses, turns, and depends upon the evening outside. Yet the sequence remains understandable. Builders could make movement easier or harder. They could place openings where the wind approached, raise a hall where heat gathered, and connect rooms rather than leaving each chamber without exchange. For the household, this architectural logic becomes ordinary experience. Someone entering from the street may feel air moving through the passage. A person seated in the central hall may find it more tolerable than a low, closed room. Someone climbing to the roof understands that the breeze overhead contributes to the comfort below. No one needs to name every physical principle. A house teaches its occupants through repetition. This doorway is better opened at this hour. That room becomes close when the air is still. The roof catches movement from the north. The hall carries warmth above the places where people remain. The useful route may change from one evening to the next, but the building provides possibilities. Its openings and levels make some movements easier. The household has more than a single doorway through which to hope for a breeze. The architecture does not create a private climate separate from the desert. It negotiates with what the desert and river valley provide. It delays some heat, redirects some air, and gives warmer air an easier exit. Descend fully into the shaded interior again. The current has traveled from the roof to human height. As it passes toward the entrance corridor, it reaches a familiar object. The porous water jar is still beside the threshold. Earlier, it offered a small patch of relative comfort. Now that the path of the air is clear, its placement becomes more than a household habit. Moving air gives the vessel its best opportunity to help. Come close without touching it. The unglazed surface has none of the hard shine of sealed pottery. Its pores allow a small amount of water from within to reach the outside. Exposed to the corridor air, that moisture evaporates. Turning liquid water into vapor requires energy, and some of that energy comes as heat from the vessel and the air nearby. The result can be a cooler jar and a small, cooler zone around it. The scale matters. This vessel does not alter every chamber. A person at the far end of the house cannot expect one doorway jar to transform the whole building. Its useful area remains close to the porous surface and the air passing over it. That limitation does not make it trivial. Domestic comfort often consists of local improvements. A shaded seat, an open doorway, a drink of water, or air passing over damp pottery may matter greatly to the person beside it. The next room may still be warmer. Dry air supports evaporation, while movement carries the effect away from the vessel. This is why the jar belongs in a drafty corridor or entrance. The wall has created shade, and the house has directed airflow. The jar adds water to that existing arrangement. Refilling it is an ordinary task rather than an architectural project. It can be moved when another passage becomes more useful. It can provide drinking water, as well as influence the small climate around its surface. One object performs several domestic roles without requiring grandeur. There is something intimate about the jar. The high ceiling works above everyone. The wall surrounds the household, and the windcatcher begins on the roof. The jar, by contrast, stands within reach. Its effect is encountered by a hand near the surface, a face passing through the doorway, or someone resting close enough to feel the moving air. It also shows why no single feature deserves to be called the one secret of the house. Without shade, the water warms more quickly. Without moving air, evaporation contributes less to the surroundings. Without a useful place to stand, the jar remains only an object. Together, the elements reinforce one another. Thick walls protect the corridor from direct heat. The roof and openings encourage movement. The vessel places evaporating water directly within that movement. The jar is not an appliance hidden in clay, and the house is not mechanically chilled. It remains an Egyptian home in a hot climate, occupied by people who understand that comfort can be improved without being perfected. The current passes the jar and continues toward the rear. Follow it. The protected interior gives way to an open work area. Here, the household has placed the task most likely to undo every cooling effort. A fire must be made, and food must be baked. The rear yard is more exposed than the inner rooms. Fading daylight reaches the open space, and a heavy hearth stands away from the sleeping chambers. Here, heat is not merely endured. It is deliberately produced. Cooking and baking require fire. A substantial hearth releases warmth into the surrounding air, and smoke must be allowed to escape. Place that hearth deep inside a low, enclosed room, and the household would add heat exactly where the walls had spent the day delaying it. New Kingdom house plans often answer this problem through separation. Kitchens and heavy baking hearths appear in open rear yards. In some arrangements, cooking may occupy a lighter structure connected with the roof. Either placement keeps more heat and smoke from gathering in the enclosed sleeping areas. The strategy is sometimes called zoning, but the household does not need that word. The practical rule is simpler. Keep the hottest work away from the rooms meant to remain more comfortable. This reminds us that houses do not receive heat only from the weather. People create it through necessary work. Bread does not bake in architectural theory. Fuel must burn, vessels must be handled, and someone must remain near the hearth while the shaded hall benefits from that distance. The open yard helps the heat disperse. Smoke has more room to rise, and warm air is not trapped beneath the same heavy ceiling as the sleeping quarters. A doorway still connects the work area to the household, but the heat source remains apart. That doorway matters. Food and people must pass through it. The hearth itself does not. The plan allows frequent movement while keeping the greatest concentration of flame, smoke, and newly created warmth at the edge of the enclosed living area. Distance also shapes labor. The person tending the hearth receives less protection than someone resting in an inner room. Architecture can spare one area by concentrating discomfort in another. The house becomes cooler, not because the hot task has vanished, but because its heat has been relocated. There is a dry honesty in that arrangement. The building may direct a breeze and delay the sun, but it cannot bake bread without making the baker warm. We do not need to invent a particular cook, a fixed evening menu, or one household schedule for everyone. The excavated hearths and plans tell us enough. Food preparation belonged to domestic life, and builders repeatedly placed its strongest heat where it could escape more easily. The location also benefits stored provisions. Grain or oil can remain away from sparks and smoke until needed. Food moves toward the cooking zone, while heat is discouraged from moving back toward the resting rooms. The separation need not be vast to matter. A wall, a doorway, an open yard, or a change in roof can alter where smoke gathers and where heat lingers. A few steps in the plan can become a meaningful difference to the body. As dusk deepens, the hearth's role changes. When the heavy work ends and the fire fades, the rear yard begins to lose its stored warmth to the open air. Beyond the doorway, the interior remains shaded, and its air route is still connected to the roof. Turn away from the hearth and cross back into the house. The rear work area falls behind. Ahead, the central hall is dimmer than before, and an inner doorway leads towards a smaller room. It is sheltered from the street and separated from the fire. Pass through the central hall and enter the inner chamber. The change is not dramatic, but several kinds of distance gather at once. The street lies beyond the entrance passage. The hearth lies behind the rear doorway. Direct light has almost disappeared. The room is lower than the hall and more enclosed. It benefits from the thick walls around the house, while the taller central space nearby gives rising warmth of larger volume. If the roof has caught a northern current, connected passages may carry some of that movement inward. This does not make the chamber a permanently cool sanctuary. It is simply one of the more protected areas available during part of the day and evening. Its comfort depends upon timing, weather, open routes, and the warmth already stored in the walls. People living here would learn these differences. Choosing a room could also mean choosing how much heat, light, movement, company, or exposure to accept. The architecture offered degrees, not absolute divisions. A room farther from the street might feel more private, but receive less direct air from the entrance. A broad hall might connect more easily to movement through the house, while also leaving its occupants more socially exposed. Comfort and privacy could overlap. They were not always the same choice. We can imagine people withdrawing from a brighter front area as evening arrives, but that remains only an illustration. Different plans and families used rooms in different ways. There is no need to assign a fixed gender, rank, or hour to every doorway. What remains certain is that architecture shapes social choices. A central hall invites shared activity and passage. A smaller inner room offers greater shelter. A rear yard holds hot work. A roof waits for the night. Privacy is partly spatial. Every additional doorway creates another boundary between the street and the person inside. Those same boundaries also soften heat and light. The most inward room is protected not by one wall alone, but by a sequence of walls, halls, and shaded passages. The protection is cumulative. Streetlight weakens in the entrance. Heat from the hearth disperses across the rear yard. Warm air rises in the hall. By the time the inner room is reached, several parts of the plan have intervened. Here, thermal history becomes bodily history. The arrangement affects where someone may sit, how closely another person passes, whether a task is done near the hearth, and when the roof becomes preferable to the room. For now, remain beside the inner wall. It still holds much of the day within its thickness. Its material is common, but not every household could give that material the same depth, finish, or architectural support. The wall leads us towards a question of resources. Mudbrick served many Egyptians. The pale finish that sometimes covered it was less evenly shared. Move close to the plastered surface, the room is subdued, but remember the facade outside, where the last sunlight struck a pale outer wall. In some prosperous urban homes and state-built housing, exterior plaster could be whitewashed. A lighter surface reflects more of the sun's radiation than a darker, exposed finish. That can reduce some of the thermal load reaching the mud brick beneath. This was an extra layer of protection, not the foundation of the whole system. The wall's thickness still performed the long work of absorbing and delaying heat. Whitewash could reduce part of what entered the wall in the first place. The evidence for pale finishes is less universal than the evidence for mudbrick itself. Many lower-status rural structures probably retained unpainted mud plaster. A pale facade should not be treated as a perfect measure of wealth. Nor should every ancient street be imagined in the same bright white. Still, the finish could matter. A household with the resources to maintain plaster and a reflective outer coating gained another modest advantage against direct sunlight. Like the water jar, the improvement worked best as one contribution among several. Maintenance matters because an earthen facade is not a permanent, untouched surface. Plaster and wash require renewal. The advantage depends not only on a choice made during construction, but also on labor and resources available afterward. Class differences, therefore, appear not only in room count or scale, but also in the accumulation of small protections. One house has thicker walls, more connected spaces, a raised hall, a shaped roof, and a maintained outer finish. Another may depend mainly on mudbrick, shade, and whatever breeze reaches an open doorway. The underlying ingenuity is not limited to the wealthy. Mudbrick provides thermal delay wherever enough mass can be built, but additional choices are not distributed equally, and a larger house has more opportunities to organize heat by location. Let your attention move down the wall. The pale exterior faced the sun. The thick brick held and slowed the warmth. The inner surface remained shaded. Below, the floor seems solid, yet another part of the household may extend beneath it. Lower spaces can use the ground as another buffer. A stair, pit, or opening leads towards storage beneath the ordinary living level. The air becomes more enclosed as we descend. Step down into the storage area. The ceiling lowers, the light fades, and large jars occupy spaces beneath or partly beneath the floor. A sunken cellar or subfloor store avoids direct solar exposure. Surrounded by earth and masonry, it can keep temperatures lower and more stable than rooms repeatedly opened to the day. The idea is useful, but the evidence requires care. Below-floor storage did not work equally well everywhere. Ground level mattered, and houses near the Nile had to contend with changes connected to the seasonal water table. A deep space that promises coolness can become troublesome if moisture approaches. This lower level should not be imagined as permanently cold, perfectly dry, or identical in every settlement. Conditions in Thebes, Amarna, and a compact workers' village could differ. Builders and households had to work with the ground beneath them. Depth offered an advantage only when it remained practical. A lower temperature could not compensate for stores threatened by dampness. The relationship between the household and the ground required attention as well as excavation. Where conditions allowed, however, depth created another buffer. The sun did not strike these walls. Daily air temperatures affected them less sharply. Changes arrived more slowly than they did in an exposed yard or on a rooftop. The sensation differs from the windcatcher above. No strong current is needed to explain the value of this space. Its advantage comes from enclosure and reduced fluctuation. It is a steadier kind of protection. The lower store can also be understood through contrast. The rooftop responds quickly after sunset, when the sky opens above it. The store beneath the floor changes more slowly, protected from the strongest swings of afternoon and night. People do not spend the evening here for comfort. The space is designed around provisions and containers rather than social life. Its temperature matters because of what the household places inside it. This broadens the meaning of a cooler house. Architecture is not concerned only with the skin of a resting person. It also influences the things a household needs tomorrow and later. Grain, oils, and other foods fare poorly when repeatedly exposed to heat. The cellar belongs to the same domestic system as the roof, though the two seem opposite. The roof becomes useful through openness after sunset. The lower store gains value through depth and separation. Listen to the house above. Movement in the hall reaches this space only faintly. The rear hearth is farther away. The thick outer wall meets the ground beyond the jars. Large storage vessels stand beneath the living floor. Their shapes fade into the dimness, but their purpose is practical and familiar. They hold provisions on which the household depends. Grain benefits from protection against direct exposure and repeated changes in temperature. Oils can remain away from sunlight and the heat of the cooking area. Other perishable foods may fare better in a lower, steadier environment than in an open yard. None of this amounts to refrigeration. The cellar does not freeze, and food does not remain fresh forever. Storage still requires judgment, suitable containers, and attention to local conditions. Yet even a modest reduction in heat can matter. Supplies gathered or acquired through work represent time and security. If they spoil quickly, the household loses more than a meal. The lower room protects effort already spent. It also gives provisions a place that is thermally quieter than the active rooms above. Doors open in the hall, air moves through corridors. Fire burns in the rear yard. The lower store remains apart from much of that daily disturbance. The jars organize movement through the house. Provisions remain below until needed. Then they are brought upward, carried through the interior, and taken toward the separate cooking area. Heat-producing work happens elsewhere, leaving the main store removed from fire and smoke. Again, the architecture divides tasks. The roof receives sleeping bodies on hot nights. The central hall manages shared space and rising air. The rear yard receives the hearth. The cellar receives goods that benefit from steadiness. This division does not make domestic labor effortless. A jar must be filled, grain must be carried, and oil must be handled without waste. Food must travel up from storage and outward toward the place where fuel burns, but the house gives those activities suitable locations. It does not ask every task to happen in one room. The lower store may be the least picturesque part of our walk. It has no broad sky, northern breeze, or pale facade catching the last sun. Its value is measured in supplies that remain usable and containers kept away from the hottest areas. That quiet usefulness belongs to social history as surely as a reception hall does. A household rests more securely when food is protected, and temperature helps shape that protection. Now climb back toward the living floor. Evening has advanced while we were below. The warmth stored in the mudbrick has continued its slow journey inward. When we return to the inner chamber, the wall no longer feels quite so removed from the afternoon. The delay is ending. The next stage of the house's daily cycle has begun. Stand beside the inner face again. Earlier, the exterior was hot, while the interior remained comparatively protected. Now the warmth absorbed during the day has traveled farther through the brick. The room begins to change. This is the trade-off of thermal mass. A thick wall delays heat transfer, but it cannot erase energy already absorbed. Given enough time, warmth reaches the inner surface and begins to enter the room. The house has bought hours, not permanent coolness. Those hours are valuable, but eventually the account comes due. By then, the conditions outside are changing too. The sun has set. Air above the roof may be moving from the north. The high hall and upper openings can help release accumulated warmth. The roof scoop can guide fresher air into connected rooms. The sequence is what makes the design effective. During the brightest hours, wall mass and shade protect the interior. Toward evening, ventilation becomes more important. Later still, the exposed roof offers another place to rest. One part of the house answers the limitation of another. If thick walls released no delayed warmth, evening airflow would matter less. If the house had no path for air, stored heat would become more oppressive after sunset. Without roof access, the occupants would lose a valuable hot night alternative. The changing wall can be felt without turning the room into an oven. Its inner surface simply becomes warmer than before. The protected chamber is no longer at its best, and the household has reason to reconsider where to remain. The shift may be gradual enough to escape notice at first. Comfort changes by degrees. A wall feels warmer, the air seems closer, and the doorway becomes more inviting because movement can be felt beyond it. This is why the ancient house should not be described as cold. Such a word erases the negotiation taking place across the day. The building moderates peaks, creates intervals, and offers choices. A body notices those choices before forming any theory. The room that felt comfortable earlier now seems close. Air movement becomes welcome. The open path toward the hall matters more. The stair to the roof begins to look less like an architectural detail and more like an invitation. Turn toward that stair. It rises from the enclosed house, bends between mud-brick walls, and leads to a space whose usefulness begins when the lower rooms start releasing the day. Place a foot on the first step. The staircase is narrow enough to feel enclosed, with walls still carrying the warmth of the house. Climb slowly. At each turn, the air changes slightly. The hall falls below, and the ceiling gives way to a dark opening overhead. Roof staircases are part of the evidence that terraces belong to ordinary domestic use. Literary references and household finds support the same conclusion. During hot summer nights, the roof could become a primary sleeping space. The staircase alone establishes regular access, not the purpose of every visit. But together with texts and domestic finds, it belongs to a wider pattern of roofs used as living space, not reached only for occasional repairs. The terrace was more than a place for maintenance or a pleasant view. Under suitable conditions, it functioned as another room. Its ceiling was the sky. Not every household had the same roof access, and not every season required sleeping above. Wind, temperature, household size, and the plan of the dwelling all affected its use. Yet the recurring evidence makes the hot night practice secure. Continue upward. The importance of the stair lies in connection. It allows the household to leave rooms that have begun releasing stored warmth and reach open air without leaving the home. The ascent changes enclosure one step at a time. First, walls rise on both sides. Then the upper opening appears, and a little more of the night becomes visible. The roof air reaches into the stair before the terrace itself can be seen. The transition resembles the entrance below, but in reverse. At the street doorway, we moved from exposed heat into shade. Here, we move from enclosed warmth toward the open night. Finally, the stair ends. Step onto the terrace. The roof feels broad after the narrow passage below. The breeze reaches it without traveling through a corridor. Nearby, the direction of the windcatcher is easy to recognize, but the terrace itself needs no scoop to encounter the air. Here, the household can respond to heat by moving rather than trying to force one chamber to remain perfect. The architecture includes movement in its answer. The roof is the open room. It waits above the heavy walls, connected by a permanent stair and ready when the night makes exposure useful. Cross onto the terrace as the final activity of the evening begins to settle. The house below remains occupied, but on the hottest nights, sleeping life shifts upward. The terrace becomes a resting place through ordinary preparation. We do not need to invent exact bedding, fixed positions, or a named family whose habits somehow represent everyone. What matters is the movement of bodies from below to above. During the day, the enclosed rooms offered shade and delayed heat. By late evening, those same walls begin to release what they stored. The rooftop, once exposed to punishing sunlight, has entered a more useful phase. This reversal shapes domestic routine. The best location is not permanently assigned, it changes with the hour. A household using the roof must share an open space. Family spacing and privacy depend upon the size and plan of the terrace, the number of people present, and the customs of that particular home. The evidence does not require a rigid arrangement. Even so, sleeping above changes the household's relationship with the building. The thick walls remain beneath the sleepers rather than around them. The central hall becomes a volume below the roof. The entrance jar, inner room, and rear hearth belong to another level of the night. The terrace is still domestic space. It is reached from inside, enclosed to some degree by the building's edges and used by the household, yet it opens directly to the air and sky. Comfort here depends partly upon accepting less enclosure. There may be more exposure to neighboring roofs, distant household sounds, and the broad night above. Relief from heat can involve a compromise with privacy. That compromise varies from house to house. A large terrace offers different possibilities from a narrow one, just as a prosperous multi-room dwelling offers choices unavailable in a simpler structure. Rooftop sleeping was a practice, not one arrangement copied without variation. Again, the solution is not to defeat the climate, it is to move with it. When the inner rooms are useful, people remain below. When the roof becomes more comfortable, they climb. No dramatic ritual is required. One person ascends, then another. Necessary items are carried, the stair receives repeated use, and activity fades as sleeping places are settled. The windcatcher continues to direct some air into the rooms beneath. On the terrace, however, the breeze needs no architectural guidance to reach the resting body. The roof offers direct access to the night. As the household settles, look away from individual arrangements. Turn instead toward the open sky above the terrace and the roof surface beneath it. The breeze is only part of the reason this space becomes useful after sunset. The exposed roof also begins to release its accumulated heat beneath the clear desert sky. During the day, the rooftop receives intense sunlight. That makes it an unforgiving place to rest while the sun is high. After sunset, the same exposure becomes an advantage. With no ceiling above it, the roof can release accumulated heat toward the clear night sky. Its surface loses warmth more readily than an enclosed room surrounded by other warm surfaces. This is radiational cooling in a simple form. The roof gives off heat after the sun disappears, and the unobstructed sky allows that process to continue. The terrace need not remain as warm as it was at dusk. The process does not require the night air itself to become cold. An exposed surface exchanges heat with the open sky above it. The enclosed rooms below remain surrounded by walls and ceilings that have also stored warmth. A northern breeze can add to the relief. It carries away warmth near the surface and passes over those resting there. But the open sky matters even when the air moves only gently. The effect is not identical every evening. A roof does not become cold by rule, and the household cannot control the sky. Weather and stored heat still shape how the terrace feels. Yet the physical pattern supports the documented practice. A roof that was too exposed during the day can become the most comfortable sleeping area after dark. Below, thick walls use mass and delay. Inside, the high hall and upper openings use vertical movement. At the threshold, the water jar uses evaporation. On the roof, exposure itself becomes useful once direct sunlight has ended. The reversal is elegant because it requires a change in timing, not a change in construction. The same terrace passes from harsh to welcoming as day becomes night. Hold your attention on the roof surface. The last obvious warmth fades. Air moves across the open space, and the household grows still. From here, imagine looking down through every level. Near the roof is the wind opening. Beneath it stands the tall central hall. Lower still are the inner rooms and the storage beneath the floor. Their usefulness has shifted throughout the day. The house is not built around one perfect chamber. It is built around a series of places whose advantages appear at different hours. Consider the whole dwelling as one evening's path. During the brightest part of the day, the thick outer wall delays the sun's heat. The inner rooms remain shaded while the street and facade receive the full glare. Food preparation stays toward the rear, where the hearth can release heat and smoke into an open space instead of burdening the sleeping rooms. As evening approaches, the central hall becomes increasingly important. Warm air rises into its height and finds the upper openings. A suitable roof scoop catches part of the northern current and guides it below. The water jar beside the doorway adds its small contribution wherever moving air passes across the porous surface. Later, the wall releases the heat it stored. The protected room begins to warm. The staircase offers another choice, and the household can move to the roof. The terrace, no longer beneath direct sun, loses warmth to the night sky. During the hot season, it becomes an open sleeping room. This is not a fixed schedule followed in exactly the same way by every family. Weather changes, houses differ, and people arrange their lives according to work, status, preference, and necessity. But the architecture encourages movement. The most comfortable place at midday may not be best after dark. The ideal location for a hearth is not the ideal place for a bed. The safest place for grain is not where people gather to talk. The house offers choices instead of one permanent solution. Its plan can be read as a series of useful distances. Sun remains beyond thick walls. Fire stays behind the living rooms. Provisions rest below. Sleeping bodies can move above. Warm air is given height, while the breeze is offered a way down. That may be the dwelling's most human quality. It does not force every activity into one undivided room. Its plan recognizes that bodies, food, fire, air, and sleep have different needs. The household follows the clock without seeing a clock face. Sunlight moves across the facade. Shadows deepen in the corridor. Warmth reaches the inner wall. The northern breeze enters, and the roof cools beneath the sky. The daily rhythm appears in surfaces and sensations. A doorway falls into shade. A hearth grows quiet. A wall begins to release warmth. The first useful air reaches the stair. People can respond to each change without expecting the house to remain the same from morning to night. Each change makes another part of the building useful. Now let the rooms form one complete view. The rear hearth, lower store, shaded chambers, high hall, roof opening, and terrace join into a final answer. Northern air reaches the roof opening. It passes beneath the angled scoop and descends toward the rooms below. In the tall central hall, warmer air rises above the occupied level. Small grates near the roofline allow some of it to leave. At the entrance, the current brushes the porous water jar and carries a little of its evaporative effect through the threshold. Around everything, thick mudbrick delays the heat of the day. On better resourced houses, maintained pale plaster may reflect part of the sunlight before it enters the wall. Behind the living rooms, the heavy hearth remains separate in its open work area. Beneath the floor, storage spaces protect grain, oils, and other provisions from the most exposed conditions. Above, the terrace waits for darkness. Once the sun is gone, the household can sleep beneath open sky while the roof releases warmth. Not every home possessed every feature. Status, settlement, ground conditions, and individual plans created differences. A modest dwelling had fewer options than this prosperous urban house. Even here, the rooms never become mechanically cold. The architecture cannot manufacture weather or eliminate a severe heat wave. Its achievement is quieter and more practical. Material slows heat. Height lifts it. Openings guide air. Water cools a small passing current. Distance separates fire from rest. Depth protects supplies. The roof uses the night. There was no single ancient secret hidden in one wall or vessel. The house became more comfortable through a layered choreography of place and time. Now the explanation can end. The familiar breeze may travel through the rooms once more, with no new puzzle waiting beyond the next doorway. Night has settled over the roof. The terrace is no longer the bright surface that received the afternoon sun. It lies open beneath the clear sky, with the sleeping household gathered in the space the evening has made useful. A mild current arrives from the north. It crosses the upper edge of the house, passes over the terrace, and reaches the opening built to receive it. Some of the air continues across the roof. Some descends. Follow that slower part as it enters the opening and leaves the sky behind. The passage narrows around it. Mudbrick surfaces rise on either side, carrying the last warmth of the day. The air travels down into the house. Below the roof is the high central hall, familiar now in its proportions. Its ceiling rises above the surrounding rooms, and the small upper grates remain near the roofline. Nothing here needs further explanation. Warmth has risen through the evening. The upper space has received it. The openings wait where the warmer air has gathered. At floor level, the hall is dark. Doorways lead toward the inner chamber, the entrance passage, the rear yard, and the stair. The current spreads as it descends. Part moves toward the high openings. Part travels lower, along the routes used by the household during the day. The room holds no crowd now. Its center is open, and its height is felt more than seen. Remain there for a moment, between the air entering from above and the doorways opening below. The walls do not move. The small grates are only darker shapes in the upper wall. The breeze leaves no mark upon the floor. It can be followed only by its passage from one familiar space toward another. As little air settles at human height before moving on, another part rises toward the upper edge of the room. The hall receives both movements without sound. Beyond it, the inner chamber remains enclosed by thick walls. Those walls still carry delayed warmth within their depth. The day has crossed them slowly, from the sunlit outer face toward the shaded rooms. There is no need to hurry that movement. The bricks have held heat for many hours. They release it in their own time. Air from above enters the smaller room and travels along the inner surface. The wall remains warm, the current remains mild, and the night continues outside. The chamber is empty of activity now. Its earlier usefulness has passed into the quiet of the hour. No one needs to decide whether to remain there or climb above. That choice has already been made. Return to the hall. The entrance corridor leads toward the street, though the street itself is nearly lost in darkness. The deep doorway retains its shape, a passage through a wall thick enough to turn one step indoors into several. Beside the threshold stands the water jar. Its unglazed surface is dim. Water remains inside, and passing air touches the vessel before continuing through the doorway. The jar has not moved since dusk. It occupies the useful place chosen for it, close to the current and close to those who pass. Earlier, the contrast between the Great Wall and the ordinary vessel was easy to notice. Now they belong to the same still view. The wall surrounds the passage. The jar waits within it. Air crosses the porous surface and moves on. Outside, the facade no longer faces the sun. Its plaster and mud brick lies subdued beneath the sky. The street has released some of its heat, and the doorway no longer divides brightness from shade. It divides the open night from the enclosed hall. Turn back before leaving the house, pass the water jar again, and move through the corridor, where the air remains gently in motion. The high room receives us once more. Its upper grates are dark marks near the roofline. The lower doorways are darker still. One passage leads toward the rear yard. The hearth there is unlit. Its heavy work is finished, and no new heat rises from the cooking area. The open space around it rests beneath the same night as the roof, though lower walls enclose its edges. The surfaces that held the day begin to lose it. There is no smoke now. No food passes through the doorway. The distance between hearth and sleeping rooms remains even after the fire is gone. The arrangement is still visible in the silence of the house. Heat belonged here when it had to be made. Rest belonged farther away. Leave the hearth where it is, cross back toward the interior, and lower your attention to the floor. Beneath the occupied rooms, the storage spaces remain shaded and enclosed. Jars stand below, holding the household's provisions. The lower level does not receive the roof breeze directly. It has its own stillness, its own depth, and its own slower changes. Grain and oil remain where they were placed. The containers occupy the dim space without movement. Above them, footsteps have ended. The house no longer carries provisions toward the hearth or water through the corridor. Its paths remain, but they are unused. Let the lower space recede again. Its stillness continues beneath the rooms as our attention rises toward the living floor. The inner rooms are dark. The central hall reaches upward. The entrance passage extends toward the jar, and the rear doorway opens toward the silent hearth. Every part of the house remains connected, though little moves through it now except air. The northern current descends from the roof. It enters the hall and divides among familiar roots. One part drifts near the upper grates. Another moves through the lower passage. A little reaches the threshold jar. The house receives what the night provides. There is no single chamber to hold our attention. The spaces pass into one another without sharp boundaries. Roof opening. High hall, corridor, doorway. Inner room, rear yard, lower store. The thick walls contain them all. Their outer faces have known the sun. Their inner faces now meet the air of night. The entrance wall still holds a little delayed warmth. The same thickness that protected the interior earlier now releases the remainder slowly. Nothing has failed. The hour has simply changed. The staircase waits beside the hall. Its steps rise between closing walls and turn toward the open roof. Begin the ascent again. The first steps remain within the house. The air is warmer here than on the terrace, and the sky is not yet visible. Climb at the unhurried pace of the building itself. One step leaves the hall lower behind us. Another brings the opening nearer. The walls still rise on both sides, but the darkness above grows wider. A little higher, the roof opening appears. The passage widens, and northern air reaches farther down. The current meets us before the terrace does. It moves along the mudbrick and continues toward the rooms beneath. Continue until the walls fall below the line of sight and the terrace opens around us. The household rests beneath the clear sky. No exact arrangement needs to be known. The roof has become a shared nighttime room, and the lower house remains beneath it. Air crosses the terrace in one long, mild movement. From here, the whole dwelling can be held in one simple thought. The wall delayed the day. The hall gave warmth space above. The jar waited in the moving air. The hearth remained apart. The lower store stayed shaded. The roof opened to the night. All of that is understood now. The breeze passes over the sleeping space and reaches the roof opening. It descends into the dark hall, touches the rooms below and finds its way through the house. Farther down, the water jar stands beside the doorway. The rear half is dark. The storage jars remain below the floor. The thick mudbrick releases the last of its warmth. Let the lower rooms recede. The house continues to hold them without asking us to visit again. Only the terrace remains near. Its surface lies open in the darkness. The stair opening rests behind us. The raised mouth of the windcatcher waits toward the north. Beyond the edge of the house, other rooftops have faded into the night. The sky stretches above the sleeping space. The household is still. A northern current moves across the roof, slight enough to notice only when it reaches the skin or the edge of an opening. It passes over the terrace and divides. One part continues beyond the wall, another turns downward and enters the house. No movement needs to be followed farther. The roof remains beneath the clear sky. The house remains below. The night air crosses them both. Then it continues into the dark. Late at night, the rooftop holds the sleeping household beneath a clear sky. The terrace has lost the harsh brightness of day, and the figures resting there are still. A mild northern breeze reaches the roof. It passes across the open sleeping space, touches the raised opening, and disappears into the house below. Within the darkened building, the high central hall remains visible only in outline. Its small upper grates wait near the ceiling. Farther down, the water jar stands beside the threshold, unchanged from dusk. The rear hearth is unlit. The storage jars remain beneath the floor. No one moves between them. Around these spaces, the thick mudbrick holds the last of its delayed warmth. Its outer face belongs to the night now, while its inner face meets the air descending from above. The house is neither cold nor sealed away from the desert. It simply rests within the conditions it has spent the day managing. On the roof, the household sleeps. Below, the breeze passes through the tall hall. The jar remains beside the doorway. The hearth stays dark. The walls hold every room in place as the terrace lies beneath the clear night sky. The house grows smaller in the darkness around it. Its roof remains open, its walls remain warm, the night air enters where the builders gave it a path. Nothing more is required from the rooms below. The sleeping household does not need to follow the movement of the air. The house receives it without attention. A current arrives from the north. It crosses the roof. It turns into the opening. Then it moves down through the darkened rooms, past walls that held the day and doorways once filled with ordinary footsteps. The air drifts beneath the high ceiling. It passes into the corridor, reaches the inner face of the mud brick, and moves away again. Nothing follows it. The current grows faint near the inner chamber. Another trace reaches the threshold. A little air passes the porous jar and continues toward the street. Soon, even those movements are difficult to notice. The rooftop is still. The stair remains open to the sky. Far below, the rooms are only dark spaces held within thick walls. The night deepens around the house. The last delayed warmth fades into it. And after the story has ended, the cool night air continues on its way.